how do we get out of here? How do we cut a deal? You have the fighting's intensifying, and to be fair and to be honest with you, I was obsessed with this in the beginning, and it started to consume me and started to really pay, I feel, a little bit too much attention to this, and it's not good for my mental health, right? Like so I kind of have been dropping by, but is my understanding that the fighting is intensified, it's getting more bloody. I think the Russian advance has stalled to a certain degree. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, I think this is like Russia originally. I think to do this very fast. So they wanted they invaded Ukraine from different directions, and from the north in Kiev area, also from the south and from Donbass and Kharkiv area, from the east. And they specifically, I think their goal was not to capture Ukraine, not to occupy entire Ukraine, but to force a regime change from pro-Western government to pro-Russian government. And they wanted either to change the government. Basically, if the Ukrainian government, they expected maybe Zelensky would not fight because Russia has military advantage, so they maybe believe that or his military would not fight, and they basically would be able to easily replace the government in Ukraine, in Kiev, with a set of Russian military forces nearby. Or they expected also that another alternative was that Zelensky would himself agree to demands by Russia to have neutral status for Ukraine, to basically give a Russian language official status, and to ban basically or kind of denazify like Ukrainian politics, which again Russia uses this body, but basically this could have been done by limited far-right organizations and policies. So and basically Russia also demanded demilitarization of Ukraine and recognition of independence of Donbass within borders of Donbass. So this was an issue which was not accepted by Ukraine, but Zelensky initially kind of agreed to discuss these demands, and there was a real possibility of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine on not on all of these points, but Zelensky basically agreed for Ukraine to become neutral country, non-NATO membership, in exchange for guarantees from the Western countries and Russia that they would accept neutral status of Ukraine, there would be no invasion of Ukraine. So there was such possibility to do this and discuss the status of Donbass separately. But this agreement was broken after a visit by a British Prime Minister, who told Zelensky not to sign any peace deal with Russia. And Zelensky then changed this completely. And again, his policy became totally opposed to any peace deal. He believed that he could defeat Russia. And after this, and this happened, Russia withdrew their forces from Kyiv area, and this kind of northern part of Ukraine, and this was presented in the West as basically defeat of Russia, that Russian forces was defeated by Ukrainian forces. And I watched this again. I watched all the videos. I watched all the evidence, different sources, like hundreds of videos and reports from different sources. And this actually was not a military defeat of Russia. Russia obviously had opposition. There was significant fighting in Kyiv area. But Russia withdrew their forces not because of, again, Ukrainian counter-offensive in this region, but because I don't believe that they wanted to occupy this region, because this was not very pro-Russian region, it was anti-Russian region. So they, in contrast to other regions of Ukraine, they just want to put a pressure on Zelensky and his government, basically by not taking military force Kyiv, but basically trying to encircle or just pressure Zelensky. And when they failed to do this, they moved their forces from Crimea and from other regions of Ukraine to Donbass. So Donbass became now main area of battlefield, or main battlefield between Russia and Ukraine. And now Russian goal was to encircle Ukrainian forces in Donbass, and they started to do this, and they're doing this slowly. So there's a kind of not stalemate, but actually a slow advance by Russia, which is very gradual. But they managed to take already a large part of Donbass, and they do this again. Still have advance they still have advance, but very slow advance. But now they rely not on their tactic, which was used at the first days during the war when they just launched their forces in Ukraine. They kind of occupied a large part of Ukraine without much fighting before the fighting started near Kiev and other regions. So they initially were able to take control of a large part of southern Ukraine, in Kherson region and so on. But in Donbass, there were much more kind of significant Ukrainian military presence forces because of the war between separatists and Ukrainian government for 8 years. So there was a very significant military presence of Ukraine, and forces there were most professional and most committed to fight with Russia, and they were all already built defensive positions. So now Russia relies not on their kind of all this kind of tactics which they tried to use in the first days of war. They now use artillery and heavy bombardment of these areas. So now there are very significant losses from Ukrainian forces there from artillery and bombardment by Russian forces each day. And Zelensky recently stated that there were each day in Donbass about 100 Ukrainian soldiers killed and 500 wounded each day, just in Donbass. And there are also significant Russian military casualties, but I don't think that they are similar to what all this media says or what the government forces say, but there are significant casualties. And now Russia tries to minimize the casualties by using their military, and bombardment, so they would just try to flatten all these areas in which they advance, and do this very slowly. But they are advancing in this area, and they are able to capture some towns in Donbass. In particular, they were able to capture Mariupol, which was largest city and port city in southern Ukraine, which was located in Donbass. So there is a gradual still progress by Russia, and I think this means that Russia is still very likely to to have advance. They want to basically take control over all Donbass, not just regions which were controlled by separatists before this war, but entire territory of Donbass, and this is now their main goal. But if there would be no peace agreement, the Russian forces might, after the Donbass, after they would be able to defeat or take control over Donbass, occupy entire Donbass, they might go to other regions of Ukraine in the south, maybe Odessa, maybe Zaporizhia, if there would be no peace agreement. So, but this would be very difficult to do. But that's why I'm not sure. I think that Russians also might have preferred to have peace agreement. But now I think they plan to annex Donbass and other regions of Ukraine which are occupied by Russia, or which would be still occupied by Russia in the future if the war would continue.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was wondering, because if peace, what's going on here is we got to make peace profitable. War is stupid. It's terrible. We have to figure out a way to make this profitable, right? Like I think if Russia could get Ukraine not to join NATO and to be a neutral country, potentially, I mean, now they'd be like, you have to demilitarize because like we're at war and I don't like this. And we could technically want to win. Then I think we could stop the bloodshed. But if not, and I'm Putin, I mean, and also I'm a huge conquest person just because of the history. So that you take this with I'm taking the whole thing, which would be incredibly expensive. And I don't know if Russia could, potentially pull that off or hold it. And you'd lose all, they've lost quite a bit of prestige in the international community because of this. But, let's not forget that the United States is just as guilty. Like the whole Iraq thing, that was definitely an invasion of a sovereign nation. We broke international law, and we did the same exact thing. We've done that hundreds of times. Maybe not hundreds of times. We've done that quite a bit. So it's a very complex issue. I really hope that the light bulbs will turn on in our leaders' heads, and we'll realize that we got to make peace profitable. It's been a long time since we've had two powers going at each other. And I mean, Russia is definitely a world power with a nuclear power. And I think that, and the institutional memory of the World War II veterans is leaving us. And people don't spend a lot of time buried in textbooks about war. And I feel like we've forgotten that. And that is what scares me. We've also forgotten the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and how that devastated Japan and just the sheer heartbreak. You can read all about it. You can look at pictures. You can look at the Pacific campaigns of when we were island hopping. You look at the atrocities in the Vietnam War that were perpetrated by, you know, our soldiers. We can look at, like, you go down to war is terrible. It puts people in a terrible place and it scars them for life. And until we can figure out, you know, how to talk to each other and how to, like, honor what we mean, what we say what we mean, and honor the agreements that we put in place, I don't know if we'll ever see an end to it. But I really appreciate the work that you've done in this, covering this history and the politics behind it, to shed some light as to which way people should have gone, which in the way things are going, and being able to foresee the beginnings of a war, right? Just in the language and in the papers and in what's going on. Like, that is a very important gift that you're bringing to the public, and I really want to thank you. You know, people like you are incredibly important, and the knowledge that you're sharing with me. And can't say that I'm hopeful now. Like, I don't know if I'm more hopeful than I was before, but it's an important message.